Hey everybody, I'm ZeldaMaster, and man oh man do we have a lot of information regarding The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I mean tons, including spoilers, so spoiler warning to those who don't want to be spoiled about the game, but myself, I didn't really care. I had to jump into this issue and see exactly what we're dealing with, and there's a lot of spoilers and information regarding Breath of the Wild in this newest issue, including one of the game's dungeons and one of its bosses of that dungeon, pretty much the boss for the specific dungeon, and it kind of gives us an idea of what the dungeon's theme is going to be and how all of the other dungeons are going to be within the game. So yeah, we got a lot of information. I mean, it's crazy, and I'm gonna go ahead and get into this. I'm gonna kind of pinpoint all of the highlights and the really interesting points. I kind of went through everything I can go through within the articles in the Game Informer magazine, and I highly suggest, if you want to check it out for yourself, to go subscribe and get the magazine. And also, before we get into this, may I just say that the cover art is absolutely beautiful. I mean, you see Link and Zelda holding the Master Sword. Link is holding the Master Sword, I believe, after he woke up, after the 100 years when he was resurrected, and Zelda is holding it when Link died, I believe, placing it for Link to pick it up 100 years after. You can kind of tell because the Master Sword is rested on Zelda's end and not rested on Link's end. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump into all of this new information regarding the Game Informer's time with Breath of the Wild. It is very, very interesting, to say the least. So to start off, as we know, the demo was played for about, I want to say 3 hours, I believe I read, and the players started off in a place called Serene Stable, which is similar to all of the horse stables we see within the game, but this one is run by Yamo and not Ember, as we saw in a different stable. And that is because pretty much every single horse stable we're going to find, because they are located throughout the game, they will be run by different characters, which is going to be very interesting. And in the stables that you will find, there are also beds that you can sleep in, and you can pay additional rupees for a better bed that will actually give you a yellow recovery heart that is pretty much non-recoverable. So once you lose that yellow heart, it will never come back unless, I believe, you sleep or get some sort of buff. I believe it's like just a yellow heart buff that you have for a temporary amount of time until you lose it. But anyways, along with that, and speaking of different characters, since we'll be meeting different characters in the stables, Beetle is back, and it is confirmed. We see Beetle within one of the screenshots, and he is going to be selling stuff to Link. So Beetle, the character, is back. It's awesome. You know, Beetle's the kind of character we want to see within the game, and I want to see what he's going to be doing, if he's going to be like a traveling merchant that we're going to be able to see, similar to previous Zelda games. But as well as that, we have a dynamic weather system, which we've seen glimpses of, with it raining and the clouds moving constantly, so you could tell that the weather is going to change in Breath of the Wild. But on top of that, the characters react to how the world changes. So if it's raining, they will run inside so they don't get wet because of the rain, and that is freaking hilarious, and it gives so much life to these characters. And while reading in the Game Informer magazine, they also touched up on how the creators, Oinuma and Miyamoto, and pretty much like they kind of put in their thoughts of the game, and they just seem to be really happy with how Breath of the Wild seems to be like a breathing, living world, and how you can see the characters walk around and everything. Like, I feel like that's something they really focused on, to give the NPCs more character, to give the animals like some sort of incentive, kind of like what we see in real life. So Breath of the Wild feels very alive in a sense, and that's something they seem to be focusing on, and that's why we have that whole dynamic weather system, NPCs kind of doing their own thing as well as reacting to the weather. Nintendo is putting a lot of attention to detail in that regard, making Breath of the Wild seem really, really lifelike. But on top of that, there will be, as you adventure throughout the world, at least according to the Game Informer magazine, difficulty spikes. Essentially, you will find areas that are way more difficult than other areas, and pretty much areas you can't really take on at the moment, and that might be because since it's an open world game, you'll find areas that are just really, really tough and you're not supposed to take it on yet, but you can access it at any time, of course. So maybe if you're good enough, you'll be able to do it, but that's going to be thrown throughout the game. So if you do want to wander and do whatever you want, you might get in trouble. There might be a specific path you want to follow, but in general, Nintendo is emphasizing that this game is open world and you're going to do whatever you want. Your playthrough is going to be unique to you, and that's one of the reasons why they removed the companion. They also touch up that there will be no companion within the game because of that reason. They want you to play the game the way you want you to play it, not how the game wants you to play it, essentially. So that's also pretty interesting to keep in mind. But on top of that, we will also find an item that will identify the shrines, which is very interesting to keep in mind because there are 120 shrines, as we know, so it will be nice to know that we can actually find the shrines throughout the game and not have to look for them, because just looking for them seems like a task on its own, let alone taking on whatever is in the shrine. So it will be nice having something that will indicate where is a shrine, because yeah, 120, that seems hard to just find them, let alone take them on. And on top of that, Link will be able to have multiple horses and grow affection and loyalty with important horses, as he can pretty much keep him within the stables. You know, Link will be able to collect more than one horse and store them within stables throughout Hyrule, pretty much the ones you're going to find, and he'll be able to ride them. And on top of that, Link can feed it like his horses and upgrade their stats. But what's really, really sad is, according to the player in the Game Informer article and whatnot, one of the horses died. Like, a Bakublin managed to kill one of the horses. So horses can die within Breath of the Wild, which is so sad to think about. So you can collect horses, you can name them, you're going to be able to tame them and all of that, but you can also lose them. So it will give you, I guess, a closer connection and a stronger bond, but at the same time you can lose the horse, so it sucks, even though you can do all of these cool things like upgrade its abilities, or rather its skills, like I guess its movement and maybe how much damage it does while feeding it, and you can also name it. But yeah, horses die, which is really sad. But on top of that, there's also bears, wolves, and deers. We've seen the deers and the wolves. I don't think I've seen a bear. I mean, maybe, but there are, a lot of wildlife. Emphasis also on Breath of the Wild, the wildlife that we're going to be interacting with. And speaking of horses, which I was talking about earlier, you can also call them from a distance, like similar to, playing Epona's Song, how you can call a horse from far away, but it can only be a specific distance. Like if the horse is on the other side of the map, it's not going to do similar to what Epona did in Ocarina of Time, where it just disappears in front of you and starts running. No, if a horse is not close enough to you, calling it won't do anything. So it has to be like a certain range in calling the horse, which I guess makes a lot of sense. But on top of that, we'll be able to mine rocks, and we can sell them for rupees. So that's something pretty interesting, because as we know in Breath of the Wild, we're not going to find rupees under tall grass and rocks and just, throughout the environment. It's going to be a lot more difficult to find rupees. So it's cool to know that there'll be a way to make money in this game, and that is by mining these rocks and selling them. And also, this kind of answers one of my top 5 hopes for the game, and that is like a dynamic combat system, because as we know, every weapon is going to have a unique set of animations, which we've seen, and according to the Game Informer, player also feels different. So the items do feel different, which is really awesome, and I thought I'd point that out because that is something I really want. I want to feel like I'm playing with different weapons with every weapon I swap with Link, so that's going to be very interesting to see. And also, according to the Game Informer player, this is the most difficult game in the Zelda franchise. Like, straight up, this is going to be the most difficult game, which is very interesting. And on top of that, Zelda herself, like the character Zelda, will eventually get mad at Link in some point in the story. Aonuma also states that, just like as a little teaser, that Zelda will eventually be upset with Link in some form of way. I don't know why, but I think that's very interesting and cool to know. So we will see Zelda, and to the point where Zelda's gonna be upset with Link. So yeah, I can't wait to see how that happens. But on top of that, And let's get into kind of like the biggest thing about this, and what really is spoiling Breath of the Wild for us is the fact that Game Informer was able to take on one of Zelda Breath of the Wild's main dungeons. Yes, as we know, there's 120 shrines, but no, they were able to tackle a dungeon. Now, Nintendo took Game Informer straight to the dungeon, so they were unable to see how you get in the dungeon. But apparently this dungeon is constantly moving. Like, it is going to be rotating and moving, and we've seen a clip of Link running through what looked like a dungeon. I presume that it is pretty much one of the dungeons, and it is rotating as well. So these dungeons are rotating, and they seem to be built similar to how the Sheikah artifacts and things seem to be built. Like, they look a lot like it. And on top of that, Game Informer says that Link must manipulate the entire enormous mechanism through his own ingenuity, which could essentially mean that Link will have to manipulate the dungeon similar to like the Sky Keep within Skyward Sword, because as we know, Link will have a 3D model on his Sheikah slate that he can till, and it will apparently solve certain puzzles throughout the dungeon with him altering how the dungeon is. That is very interesting to think about, because what is a 3D model gonna look like? Well, I have an idea, which I'm gonna get into in just a second, but on top of that, in these dungeons, we're gonna find a substance known as Malice that will cover the dungeon, and this Malice substance, I believe we've seen it before. I personally called it the Calamity Ganon Sludge, which is pretty much the weird thing that we've seen throughout Hyrule, the nasty substance that resembles Calamity Ganon, and if Link does touch it, he will get hurt, so he'll have to, you know, get rid of it himself. But on top of that, there is no compass or signature item within these dungeons, and the boss for this dungeon is a really insane idea of a boss. It is known as Blight Ganon, and the voice tells you, which I'm assuming is Zelda's voice, says that it is one of Ganon's own. It plays dirty, so yeah, it sounds like something Ganon would do. Play dirty, of course. But anyways, this Blight Ganon has no face and a gun-like arm, as well as it creates tornadoes and fires large spikes. So yeah, this seems like a very crazy looking machine for a boss, and I have a feeling this is not just the only one within the game. Now, hear me out. So this is one of the dungeons we've seen, and if you look at the screenshot of Link fighting the boss, Blight Ganon, we can see that Link is somewhere above in the sky. He's also outside, no longer within the dungeon. Now, my theory here is that Link is fighting this boss, you know, the dungeon boss, Blight Ganon, in the air on top of one of the 4 Sheikah giants, which is the bird-like Sheikah giant that we've seen in the trailers. Now, the reason why I say that is because, one, we know that the dungeons move. Yes, the dungeons will constantly be moving, not just this one, but the other dungeons within the game. And the idea is that there are 4 main dungeons. Each dungeon is one of the 4 giants that the Sheikah deployed and created, and since they are essentially evil now, Link must find all 3 of these giants, enter them, take on all the evil what's inside it, and then defeat the Blight Ganon of each giant. And since, you know, this is the bird one, this will be the Wind Blight Ganon, and then we'll find, you know, for each other giant their own respective element that has a certain Blight Ganon that you must take on. I believe that's going to be like the whole idea, and that's why you can skip each dungeon, because the dungeons seem so bizarre and crazy to think about. I mean, Link is gonna have to jump on a giant, enter it, and defeat whatever evil is inside of it. And maybe once Link does that, he'll be able to control all 4 giants and have them help him defeat Calamity Ganon once and for all, because he'll be on his side and no longer taken over by Calamity Ganon and the Blight Ganon that might be what's currently controlling it in each of the 4 giants. So that's at least my idea of how the dungeons are going to be, and I feel like it makes a lot of sense. I mean, what we've seen so far of this current dungeon that has Blight Ganon as the boss, it really shows that it looks like what could be inside of a Guardian, and especially with the final battle being high up in the sky, it must be on the very top of the giant bird machine giant that we've seen in the trailers, one of the 4 giants. And yeah, once Link defeats it, he will have control of it, and it will start to go blue again. You know, as we've seen, it has a blue aura instead of the red aura that Calamity Ganon has once it's taken over. So yeah, that's my whole idea of how this will work, and overall the Blight Ganon idea seems insane. I really wonder if it will continue or if we're just gonna have Wind Blight Ganon, but in general, what we've seen so far in this Game Informer magazine has been insane, and a lot of very, very interesting stuff to go by. So yeah, what do you guys think so far of all of this information? Let me know. And what do you guys think of my theory? It is similar to Majora's Mask in the sense that, you're gonna want to save the giants, 4 giants as well, and there are 4 dungeons, but I have a feeling that might be the idea Nintendo's going for as well this time around. But instead of just saving the 4 giants, you're also entering the giant, and the giant is the dungeon, and yeah, it just seems like it's way more hectic this time around, and I really hope that is the case. Overall, like I said, let me know what you guys think of that theory, and what you think of all of this new information, and overall what you're excited for most in Breath of the Wild, and let me know what it is you'd want me to talk about next regarding Breath of the Wild and any other new information about the game. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I feel like I'm saying anyways a lot, but yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I've been ZeldaMaster, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!